Welcome to the podcast where we discuss health, health span, lifespan, and longevity. I'm Dr. Noor Gajraj. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Dr. Noor Gajraj. Today we're going to talk about therapeutic plasma exchange, and I have a special guest. Brad Youngren, MD, is CEO and co-founder of Circulate Health, a company dedicated to extending human health span. A former U.S. Army physician, Dr. Youngren served as a combat physician in Iraq and was awarded a Bronze Star and Combat Medal badge. At Circulate, Dr. Youngren leads an expert team of clinicians and scientists working to harness the potential of therapeutic plasma exchange to advance health and longevity. So thanks very much, Dr. Youngren, for coming on and discussing this topic. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about the work you do.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me and appreciate the opportunity. So, yeah, I think I've been obviously as a physician interested in this longevity field and generally primary care and health span for some time. My previous company, I'm a serial entrepreneur, was focusing on AI-based primary care and trying to see if we could improve the standard of care. So just been spending a lot of the last decade in this space in one way or the other. Over the last 2+ years now, I've been involved as CEO of Circulate Health. The company was really formed to initially to do really the first human trial, which we call the Circulate trial, looking at health span metrics and cellular rejuvenation metrics, if you will.
Yeah.
Some of your listeners probably are aware of the rat parabiosis studies, but to review those because they're critical for understanding why we did this study, there's a bunch of work by Dr. Conboy and others that looked at when you hook up the circulatory systems of a young and old rat that are genetically similar, that in essence, summating lots and lots of data, it looked like phenotypically you would get older and the old rat would get younger. So lots of interest in what's going on in the, humors of the body, if you
Right.
will.
Right.
And so that really spurred the decision to go ahead and look at plasma exchange as a potential methodology that could be used to improve human health span based on those rat trials. So we embarked on the Circulate trial. It took a number of years, backed by Coastal Ventures. We were able to essentially, the theory was, could we create human impact on longevity or health span, more importantly, by embarking on plasma exchange? In other words, taking plasma out of the body, but not returning young plasma, someone else's plasma to your body, because we thought there was likely a bunch of regulatory
Right.
issues with that. How wonderful would it be if we could achieve similar or better results using just therapeutic plasma exchange as a modality for human health span. So that's what the trial was fundamentally built under. So that Circulate trial was published in Aging Cell in May of this year, finally came out in peer review. But we had the data last year, which really allowed us to accelerate commercial growth of the company. But that trial was fundamental in just showing that this specific procedure really seems to have a significant benefit for humans. The trial really I categorize as three subsets of work. Some of it's published in the paper, some's not, but we looked at things like grip strength and balance. Eric Verdin is the co-founder of Circulate Health. So we have a deep partnership with the Buck Institute and partner with them for a lot of the analysis with David Furman as well as one of our advisors. You're probably familiar with leaders in the space. We were able to look at like 2,600 proteomic, lipomic markers, things of that nature. So that's like the
Right.
second cohort of data that we looked at. And we were looking for lots of different things, phenotypic changes, upregulation and downregulation to be consistent with cellular rejuvenation, things of that nature. And so that was the second group. And to fast forward, that looked really encouraging in the results we got from the human trial. And the last group was what people kind of anchor around in language and conversations around the trial, which is we ran all the patients pre and post therapeutic plasma exchange samples through biological clock testings that were on the market at the time. And we just said, we don't know which ones are more valid than the others. Let's just take a very agnostic approach to that. We ran it through all 36. So
Right.
we ran every patient, every sample through all 36 clocks that were available at the time. And that data showed on average 2.6 years of biological age reduction in 3 months of therapy, which has got a lot of the press that we've received with the New York Times and other venues around the results of this circulate trial.
So let's just start with the technique. How much blood do you take out of the patient?
That's one of our sort of patents is really, and we published it so we can talk about it, is we were targeting essentially around one plasma volume
Mhm,
of blood with one procedure. Now, some patients get more than one, and in
mhm,
the study they did, but so roughly around one plasma volume, which is can vary, but somewhere around three-quarters of your plasma is rough shot, maybe 80%. It's a logarithmic curve and it's weight-based, so there's some other complexities there. But generally, we're taking out a fair amount of your plasma and replacing it with a substance called albumin,
mhm.
which is has its own it's human derived, but not considered a blood product. And so that has some benefits to, as opposed to normal saline as a component for the replacement fluid, because it has its own antioxidant properties and is typically drawn from younger patients as well. And
Okay.
we use human derived albumin. Then two of the arms really looked at using one of the arms, excuse me, used IVIG after the treatment was done. We're taking out a bunch of your plasma, replacing it with albumin because you need to have some sort of blood pressure support in the
Right.
circulation. When you're taking
Mhm,
something out, you need to put it back in. But there's some additional benefits in that to albumin, as I described. That's why we chose that substance. And then one of the arms, we actually, as soon as we were completed, gave a small, low dose of IV immunoglobulin therapy. That actually had some improved benefits as well for biological age testing, interestingly.
mhm.
That's the general procedure that we embarked on. We actually, of note, had one arm that was we called the sham arm. So we
Yeah.
actually drew blood out behind a wall. Patients didn't know, but they actually weren't getting plasma exchange. We turned the machine on and everything.
Mhm.
And so that allowed us to have a nice comparator arm to see, well, what if we didn't do anything? What would happen to these patients' proteomics, metabolomics, and biological age tests? And so that's sort of in total what we're able to accomplish.
So, just to remind the listeners that the if we take blood and we spin it in a centrifuge, it'll be that clear yellow liquid which contains the antibodies and other proteins, very important clotting factors. So, the average volume of blood in a adult is about 5 liters. So, are you circulating that 5 liters of blood through some kind of technique? That's why I was asking you how much blood they take out. I presume, like, if you go for a blood donation, it's about 500 cc's. I would imagine you're separating the plasma from the blood, and there's 5 liters of blood. How do you achieve that?
Yeah, I think probably good to take a step back and talk about the machine briefly. So I describe it generally as it's a giant centrifuge with a really impressive computer associated with that. It's, as you said, it's you're spinning the blood down to its components and it's separating it out, and
Mhm.
then we're able to take the least dense layer, which is the plasma, and essentially siphon it off while we're turning the other components of the blood back to your red blood cells, your platelets, your white blood cells,
Mhm.
because those have different densities. All of that, and you can see this when you look at blood counts post-procedure, like you're not getting really significant drops in hematocrit red blood cells or in platelet counts because they're, for the most part, being returned to the patient. So you have an IV in each arm. Typically, you're pulling the blood out, you're running it through this device, separating the blood out, taking the plasma out, returning the other components with the albumin as the fluid replacement to the body. The interesting thing about what we've been doing is the machine itself has been used in the United States for 30 years.
Mhm.
Really not new technology. So it has a nice safety profile. It is the same machine if you went to donate blood in your local blood center. It
Right.
is absolutely the same machine. But again, as you stated, if you go give blood, you may give 500 or 750 milliliters of blood, and that's usually replaced with normal saline. So
Mhm.
much smaller volumes of extraction in those scenarios.
Yeah. And this technique has been used in other situations. There's been a lot of interest in protein-rich plasma, so the safety and the technique is well established. So let's say we've got antibodies and maybe some harmful proteins, and obviously you get them out of the plasma. How often do you have to do it? Do those, I would imagine those harmful proteins and antibodies come back? Do you have to repeat it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is yes for most people. Unfortunately, the trial couldn't follow patients out for extended periods of time because my personal belief is that it's probably quite heterogeneous based on your genetics, what your external exposure in life are. Do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you exercise? Do you have a good diet, et cetera, et cetera, as far as what those inflammatory markers look like and when you would quote need it again. Most patients in the U.S. market that we're servicing are getting 1 to 4 treatments, sometimes 6 up front, depending what they're getting at 4. Again, some of these patients are coming with chronic diseases which have indications from the Society of Apheresis, and then following it up with some sort of maintenance protocol, which may be every quarter, maybe every 6 months. A lot of the work we're doing now with our partner clinics is working with them to collect additional data. So although we are a commercial endeavor, we are collecting data to understand some of these questions that still remain, which is how often are patients reverting back to baseline when they would benefit from a maintenance treatment? So, because we've developed software in the back end and we can collect data from the clinics in partnership with them, we're starting to look at many things to include that, which is can we really tailor and customize the treatment to the patient based on what we're seeing in their biomarkers. So some patients may be quite highly optimized and they only need it once a year. Others may need it every 3 months. And that's kind of what we're working on right now.
Excellent. So, if somebody's interested in this technique, who could be helped? I've got a little list here: neurological disorders, renal disorders, hematological disorders, and autoimmune disorders such as rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus. What do you find in terms of diagnoses? What kind of patients are utilizing this technique?
Great question. And we have evolved servicing two kinds of clinics. One is I just call them broadly longevity clinics. Those include precision medicine, longevity, functional medicine clinics, or yeah, as well. And then we have chronic disease clinics, which we categorize them as those, and they're just generally patients that have sicker chronic diseases. They're physician-led practices typically, and they have a belief in plasma exchange as a potential benefit to those populations. There's research ongoing on a variety of other topics here. There's long COVID research going on this to see and clarify is there some benefit there. We don't have enough data yet, in particular with that one, but there's physicians who believe this has an impact on POTS or other autoimmune disorders, chronic fatigue syndrome. So there's a broad-based interest and exploration going on in this space. Additionally, there's work looking at obviously another hot topic is micro and nanoplastics, where, as you know, come out of nowhere the last couple of years
Right.
in terms of its visibility. When I started reading the papers coming out of New England Journal of Medicine and elsewhere, I became quite interested in this. And so we've been collecting the largest data set on micro nanoplastics reduction. But hopefully, if the data, we should probably release the data the next few months actually, but could be a potential therapy as well. We need to get the data collected and analyze it. But we've been out collecting data on plasma exchange and plastics reduction for about a year and about 16 months now. So probably have the largest data set in the world there, frankly, in that
Wow.
particular domain. Very excited that'll be our next publication release.
Excellent.
Hopefully.
All right. So whenever I think about a technique, I always talk about there's some things to look at. Number one, safety. We can have something that's very effective, but if it has a terrible side effect profile and even mortality, that wouldn't be good. But safety is number one. We can talk about safety. And then efficacy, also convenience. If you have to get an injection 3 or 4 times a day, that's not very convenient. And also access. Of course, with this, there's going to be a cost. So, how about what would you say about the safety?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was interesting and compelling was the machine has a long-standing safety profile. The machine we typically use has FDA clearance for plasma exchange, obviously, but also specifically for sickle cell. Like it's used in a variety of hospital scenarios, familial
Yeah.
hyperlipidemia syndrome, or whatever. Although I should strike that machine's a little bit different, but lots of safety data over many years related to this. Obviously, some of this is being used in CAR T cell therapy for cell. The other machine could be used for cell collection as well.
Hmm.
And used for different therapies that way. So I think we have a fair amount of safety profile data. Additionally, the trial obviously documented and published safety data as well on the trial patients, and it had a very high safety profile. We had one patient in the entire trial with one treatment had a mild allergic reaction to albumin, which is known that a small percentage of patients can have a mild allergic reaction to albumin. So yes, but beyond that, we didn't capture any negative safety profile in those patients that were in the trial. So that was also encouraging. So we had historical data and then actual data from the trial, the circulate trial itself, to suggest this is a,
Yeah, I wouldn't
fairly.
expect any bad side effects. I'm an anesthesiologist, so obviously in the operating room, patients, lose blood. We see that. That's kind of what you're doing, taking out blood. And then we also infuse plasma to replace clotting factors. So we already know what the issues might be, taking blood out and putting plasma in. So, I see, for me, I think the safety would be good. Next is efficacy. I know this is a hard one to talk about because, you need to look at it in probably biggish trials. Have you got anything to say about efficacy? What's the percentage of people that get a benefit?
Totally fair question. I think, we're still a relatively young company. Obviously we were a research company for 4 years, then we sort of the last couple of years have this commercialized business. One of the key things we're trying to do is develop this data collection on the back end so we can understand efficacy and sort of durability of therapy across multiple dimensions. So we understand as it relates to different chronic diseases, we understand what its durability is and efficacy as it relates to longevity phenotypes that we're interested in. Obviously, the trial was primarily focused on health span and cellular rejuvenation,
Hmm.
but patients are getting it for chronic disease therapies as well. So the important thing is prior to Circulate, there was no one at scale collecting this data. So that's sort of the other side of the company, which is providing data collection and research opportunities across some of the dimensions I've already mentioned. And hopefully, as we scale across the globe, we're just actually expanding into other countries that we can actually start to collect data at scale much faster and answer questions much faster because this area needs a bunch more research. This area needs a bunch more data. And I think we can get that much faster with this approach. The data is not going to be harbored at the individual clinic level,
Hmm.
and that'll help us scale much faster numerically. So hopefully we can answer some of these questions. I mean, they need to be answered, and we've always wanted to build a company around safety, efficacy, and a brand around grounding in human data.
Hmm.
So we want to be grounded in science. We talk in that way with that language when we go to when I speak at conferences or whatever. We try and reflect what we know. We also try and be candid about what we don't know. What didn't the study look at as an example? Well, we only followed patients out for 6 months. So we
Hmm.
don't really know from the study itself what the durability of the therapy is. Now we are learning that because we have 24 partners now and growing who we're working with and gathering data to better understand that. But there's still a lot to be answered there.
So, if someone's watching this, the potential candidates, how would they get a little bit more information or even set up an appointment? I know you've got facilities in several states, so maybe how would somebody do that? Get more information and perhaps set up a treatment.
Yeah, I mean, we have this the cities we're in well, on our website because that's always dynamically changing. But generally speaking, right now we're in Hawaii, the Seattle metropolitan area, Northern California, Southern California, San Diego, Austin, Dallas, all throughout Florida and New York City, and we're currently expanding into Nevada and Arizona and Utah,
Mhm.
in particular, and then we're expanding into Mexico and some other foreign countries. But that looks a little different, obviously. But for U.S. patients who are looking for referrals, what we typically tell patients is just come to the website. Our physicians or nurses are happy to answer specific questions. And if they're looking for referrals, we can direct them to a clinic in their area of the country they live in that would be most convenient for them and sort of facilitate that
Yeah.
handoff, if you will.
Yeah, you have a
We have,
very substantial organization. It's not like you've got a solo physician trying to figure it out himself. I like the fact that you've got an enormous amount of experience and you are looking at it scientifically and collecting data. So I like this approach. So let's say a physician is watching this and he says, oh, I want to get more information. What would be the best way for a physician to get more information about incorporating it into their practice?
We have two workflows like on the website. You can
Okay,
identify yourself as a clinic owner or as a patient who's looking for plasma exchange. So that will, so we do get inbounds from clinics on the website all the time, and that's the best way to kind of start that workflow conversation. But we're always open to those conversations. We're excited to find high quality clinics that are scientifically oriented that want to, and so that's the quickest way. And then we're obviously now that we've developed a fairly good service mechanism in place to get the services up and running in your clinic pretty fast. So that's been nice. As we've grown, it's certainly become easier and easier for us to add in the clinic. So obviously, as we're moving from 20 to 30 right now, it's much easier than it was going from 0 to 5. We've gotten to 24 now and since May of 2024. So we're continuing to expand relatively fast. And we just want to be this supportive services brand organization where the clinics can trust us. The nurses work for us. We bring our nurses in, we bring our machines in and partner with you. And you know that the service level will be best in class. The nurses are best in class, and the quality management safety protocols are best in class. And so you can sort of be so these clinics are very comfortable in those partnership relationships.
excellent. So to finish up, maybe you could just leave us with two or three points you would like people to know about this techniques.
I think we're entering a renaissance of plasma exchange. I mean, it's been known for some time, and there's been some physicians postulating in the literature for years that this may have a benefit for health span based on what we already knew about what the impact of the procedure. We finally gotten to that point where we're getting massive growth, interest, and expansion in the procedure itself, which is going to allow us to more rapidly answer these questions. I think that that is an exciting time for us, both from a commercial perspective, but also from a research perspective as we expand across the country and the globe. And I think there's going to be new indications. Not to get into details, we're doing some additional research on new indications potentially for the treatment or some new treatments in that dimension that could be incredibly helpful. So from that perspective, I just think in general, obviously, you live in the space as well. The longevity space is very interesting right now. There's a lot of investment dollars going to the biotech side as well as the services side, and patients are very interested in a new approach to longevity, which frankly, from my perspective, is just primary care. But we've got really exciting opportunities in that space, and so we're also looking and leveraging different new exciting partnerships in the space. Some new diagnostic testing we're working with, some non-invasive diagnostic testing we're working with. Obviously, we're specifically interested in the pre and post impact as it relates to plasma exchange, but these kind of partnerships are also things we can bring to the clinics, which I think creates value add for us in our partnership and relationship.
Excellent. I want to thank you. Also, I want to congratulate you for having this enterprise. You've put a lot of work into it. You're an MD, and you're maintaining good quality, and you're also collecting scientific data. So keep up the good work, and perhaps we'll talk again when you have some more results from your studies.
Sounds good. Thanks. Appreciate you having me.
Please subscribe to my channel and read my new book, 100 Pathways to Longevity. Add 25 years to your life, available on Amazon.